Hello and welcome to Healthy Kingston, a program of the Kingston Board of Health. And my name is Janet Wade and I'm your host. Well, the days of summer are upon us and there's a lot to think about as far as summer safety and keeping ourselves healthy. And that's children up through adulthood. And we'll be speaking about that later in the program. However, we are in the midst of a major public health problem currently that we're all very much aware of, and that is gun violence in our country. So I feel that we would be remiss if we did not discuss that now. It's too important to overlook. And gun violence, basically the definition is violence committed with the use of firearms. For example, pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, or machine guns. The Centers for Disease Control feels that firearm deaths continue to be a significant and growing public health problem in the United States. In 2020, 79% of all homicides and 53% of all suicides involved firearms. From 2019 to 2020, the firearm homicide rate increased about 35%, and the firearm suicide rate stayed high. The firearm homicide rate in 2020 was the highest recorded in over 25 years. Long-standing systemic inequities and structural racism limit economic and educational opportunities, and they certainly help to contribute to unfair and avoidable health disparities among some racial and ethnic groups. However, this is affecting all of us regardless of our nationality or our race, cultural background. Against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, the substantial increase in the firearm homicide rate, along with notable increases in firearm suicide rates for some groups, has widened racial, ethnic, and other disparities. For example, young people, males, and Black people have the highest firearm homicide rates and experienced the largest increases in 2020. And the reasons for the increased rates and widening disparities are very complex. Multiple stressors associated with the COVID-19 pandemic may have contributed to these increased numbers. However, we're going to talk about a lot more issues today that have just help with disrupting our society and the mental health, and particularly of our young people, be that stress, social isolation, the economy, and a number of other factors. Stopping firearm violence now and in the future requires a comprehensive prevention approach focused on reducing inequities. Strategies should address the underlying physical, social, economic, and structural conditions known to increase firearm homicide and suicide risks. And some prevention strategies will be more important than others and will have long-term effects. And that's why I've invited today a lifelong Kingston resident, Linda Loring. I'm sure many of you know her. And she's been a tremendous advocate for many social issues here in our community for a number of years. And she's going to be speaking to us about the work that she is doing in promoting action against gun violence and the organizations that she belongs to that you may potentially want to join as well. And she's definitely going to shed light on gun violence, particularly among young people. So thank you, Linda, very much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I know you have a very significant statistic, which if you don't remember anything else as far as statistics in this program, this is the one to zero in on.
Yeah. Gun-related injuries have led to the death of so many kids and teens now that it is the leading cause of death amongst children and teenagers in this country.
That is a tremendous statement, and what a sad statement, and certainly something that we very, very much need to address as a society at this point.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the victims. What are the warning signs that you're looking at for people who might have an issue with gun violence or getting involved with gun violence?
Yeah, we have, when you think about it, there's the greatest percentage, and this statistic can vary anywhere from like 55% to 65% of the deaths in this country are suicides. Okay, this is deaths with suicides. This is gun deaths, and this would then be deaths by gun. Suicide.
Right.
Okay, and the issue there, of course, is that it's nearly always fatal. It's nearly always fatal if someone chooses to, use a gun.
Right.
To do this, and the fact that amongst young people that it can very often be such an impulsive act. Something that 20 minutes later they might not consider doing, and yet the fact that they have access to the gun. And that's what brings us to the greatest part of our work, when you think it's the greatest number of deaths, when you look at the whole issue, is by suicide, and guns, is the safety of the gun in the home. Is it locked up? Is it secure? If it's not in the hands of the owner of the gun, then it is by law. It needs to be locked up. And so what we do, the organizations that I belong to, each have their own particular campaign. I know with Moms Demand Action, it's the Be Smart program. And with the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence on Cape Cod, it's called Lock It Up. And they really, we're out there tabling at events and so forth. Whenever we can get out there in public and hand out flyers and brochures and get people to talk to us about this. And often we have gun locks, and that starts the conversation if we can actually hand somebody a gun lock.
Really?
And they take it because, oh yeah, there is a gun in the house. And we start a conversation about, okay, this is a beginning. A gun lock is a beginning, but that gun lock, then that gun should be, of course, empty, the ammunition stored separately, and and then in a safe of some sort, a gun safe of some sort, to which only the owner has access.
Right.
And we talk about, hiding places in houses, and, kids know your hiding places. There's just no way around it. That's not considered secure if you have a hiding place for your gun.
Right.
It's the actually locked up gun, empty, no ammunition in it, and then in a gun safe as well.
What about having the conversation with the family members?
With the family members. And this is the best way for the message to get out. It's amongst family members and friends. So if you're at all concerned about this, then this is what you can do, is just bring it up and say, I've heard about yet another gun death, another accidental death that a toddler's gotten a hold of a gun. Or, oh my gosh, a teenager has just committed suicide. And I've heard about this, or, maybe not personally. I know for me personally, I haven't been touched personally by any of this. But through the stories now, working with the groups, and we talked about soul boxes a few years ago,
right,
creating soul boxes to represent the souls of people who have died with gun violence, and then creating boxes, for the names of folks and finding out a little bit about them, that begins to touch you in a way that, you can't turn away from it anymore. Right. You have to think, okay, what is the cause? It's access to firearms. And the firearm numbers in this country now are beyond the beyond. We're over 400 million.
Wow.
400 million civilian-owned firearms in this country. And that's certainly more guns than people.
Right.
So they're not going away.
No.
They're not going away.
No.
But unfortunately, what we can try to change is that 4.6 million children live in households with unsecured firearms.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's huge.
It's huge.
And so that's where, we come in.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we want to do is educate. And like I say, with the Be Smart program that the moms do, and, they're out in schools, they're out in public, educating to that. And with what we have, the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence and their Lock It Up program. And we've gone to different police departments, even, and offered our services and what we know and, suggestions as to how we can be working together on things like this. So there's so many ways that we try to educate and, collaborate,
right,
and advocate for gun safety and saving lives. This particular brochure was done by the Grandmothers on the Cape, and it's you can save a life now. And that's by simply thinking about these issues, locking up the safe storage of your gun, the ERPO, which is the Extreme Risk Protection Order, which is being able to literally take the hands out of, a gun out of the hands of somebody who's not, showing themselves to perhaps being
having tendencies.
Yeah, the tendency to harm themselves or to harm someone else.
Right.
And you can call the police department and let them know that somebody in your household is perhaps not going to be, safe with a gun in the household, and have that gun removed, And then there's absolutely a process, that person can have that gun back, after a hearing which will determine, if it really is safe to return that gun to that person.
Right.
But that's the first thing that you can do. And ERPO has been, it's been a law in Massachusetts since 2018.
Okay, that's in an acronym. Can you give us what that means?
Extreme Risk Protection Order.
Okay.
So it's an order to remove the gun, under an extreme circumstance.
Right.
And yet, with due process very quickly, for the owner of that gun, to have a hearing,
right,
as to whether or not, this was an accurate situation, or not.
Right.
And that hasn't been used a lot in this state yet. There's about 19 states now that have this, and it's absolutely known to save lives. But it hasn't been used widely, and I think it's because a lot of people don't know it exists.
Right.
So this is the other job that we have, to get the word out about ERPO.
Right.
Okay. And I've spoken about this is safe gun storage and getting the word out, asking your family members, and again, asking especially with young children that are going out on play dates, or even teenagers who are going out to babysit in somebody's house, having the conversation with that, homeowner first about whether or not there's a gun in the house. And if it's, if the answer is is it safely stored?
And there's something else I wanted to add, because I know when we had the director of Moms Against Gun Violence here, she was saying, even if you don't have guns in your home, that you tell your children, if you're in a home with guns, you get nowhere near them. If your friend, makes an overture to go near them, you leave, you get out of there. That you do not want to be playing with guns at anyone's home. And coming back and letting your parents know about that, so they can intercede and make sure that this family knows that their children is looking at their guns and is interested in playing with them, or looking at them anyway.
Having the conversation with the kids, it's
all kids,
it's so
really
important. And back to the homeowner, it can be treated as if, you were talking about an allergy. So many kids these days, have allergies. It seems to be more than when, I was raising my kids. And, there are grandparents out there raising their grandchildren, that may not even think about it, because when we were raising our kids, there weren't as many allergies. There certainly weren't computers to be asking how much computer time, you may be allowing your kids to spend, and that might be a question you might want to ask. And also you might, in this conversation ask, and, I really do need to ask, are there any guns in the house? And if so, how are they stored?
Right.
You know, so.
Can you tell me, I know you're involved with 3 organizations, what they are. Obviously, they advocate and they get educational information out there and they make people aware of the gun violence issue. But what they are and how people can get involved.
Sure. They all have amazing websites, very informative websites. And the first thing I did after, it was actually my involvement started in 2018. It was after Parkland. You know, there's usually something that's, you know, triggers you to finally say, oh my gosh, this is a priority. I really want to do something about this. Right. What can I do? This is just unacceptable, you know. And for me, it was Parkland. For a lot of the people I'm around, it was Sandy Hook. You know, for the moms and the grandmothers on the Cape, they both started right after Sandy Hook. For Parkland, it was the March for Our Lives group and the Students Demand Action group. And we happened to be we were going to be out of town, out of state. And I know our church was taking a group into the March for Our Lives in Boston, which was about a month after Parkland. And it was a demonstration arranged by the young people saying, wait a minute, we don't want to live like this. You know, and we ended up, we were actually in Palm Springs, California, and the kids there, the high school, had organized it totally themselves. They did a 3-mile walk from the stadium. All the speakers in the stadium were young people. And I was so inspired. Inspired.
Obviously a national issue when you go to see it in all these states being addressed.
Yeah.
So what are the names of the 3 organizations?
So I came home from there and said, okay. And I found out about Moms Demand Action. Okay. And they do they do their meetings essentially online or on Zoom. But they're always arranging, you know, like tabling events, as I say, where they sit to be there to educate, or their, you know, postcard writing campaigns and things like that. About the vote.
South Shore. And I know this is South Shore.
Oh, the Moms Demand Action is in every state. And there's so many in the state of Massachusetts. And there is a South Shore. But I think they've actually combined, and it's the state now, but absolutely just look for Moms Demand Action. You see their red T-shirts. And and they're out there. They are really out there. They're a really big force. And they're under the same umbrella that the Students Demand Action. So you'll be seeing them out there a lot more, and you're hearing them on TV. After one mass shooting after another, you know, you'll see representatives of the students, right?
Right.
The other organization that I joined almost immediately was Grandmothers Against Gun Violence on the Cape. And they're the ones that are responsible for this awesome brochure that, you know, has the 3 sections in it talking about suicide and FERPO and safe gun storage. And
people can get those. I thought you said you were going to put some of them at the Council on Aging.
There's they should be available at the Council on Aging. Right now, they're available at Sampson Hall, which is a hall that's often open to many. It's a church hall in Kingston here for First Parish. They're available there.
Okay.
And the other group that came out of Grandmothers on the Cape, and through a series of events, you know, and Zoom, a lot of Zoom, have combined with a woman from Grandparents for Gun Safety in Kansas City. And they realized that this national network of grandparents, which really can be a very good group, you know, to be out there. Maybe some of us have the time.
Right, exactly.
we have the time. Maybe in some cases that's the case. And they had been getting requests from other states, people in other states saying, okay, so now that's a national advocacy group. And they absolutely are there to educate and collaborate and advocate for gun safety and saving lives. And that group is called Grandparents Uniting for Gun Safety.
Okay.
And their website is grandparentsunitingforgunsafety.org.
And we'll have all these organizations, their websites put on the screen so you can have access to them.
Yeah.
Major takeaways here. Obviously, be informed.
Absolutely.
realize that it is a public health issue.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not going away.
And it's not going away.
It's not going away. And with the surge in gun sales that happened during COVID, based on a lot of fear, I think, but absolutely, for some reason, people felt safer buying a gun.
Yeah.
But that leaves so many weapons in homes. Are they stored safely?
Rightly. Remove the risk. That's pretty much what you're talking about.
Remove the risk.
Mm. We've had former programs on mental illness and suicide, which certainly play a big part into this, being that a good percentage, at least 57% of these gun deaths are from suicide. That's a whole other issue unto itself, but we will have resources on the screen. Do you want to just mention those? There are resources that we're going to put out there for people who have suicidal tendencies or are suffering with mental health issues that need to be addressed.
Because it's fairly recent, that 988 number may not be familiar to everybody, but that's a suicide prevention helpline.
Okay, and you have that.
Yeah, the 988 number. And then there's also the the numbers for the hotlines that were
and we'll have those on the screen.
Have existed before.
Okay, so basically, be informed, remove the risks, which are the guns. Educate your family, friends, neighbors. Might be a great neighborhood watch topic, and then know your resources. And I would have them posted on your fridge or on the bulletin board in your kitchen, so you have easy access. You may not need them for your family, but you may need them for someone else. Linda, thank you so much for being with us. It's
welcome.
wonderful to have someone like you here in Kingston who is willing to look out for all of us and advocate for our best interests. So thank you.